Hello, hello. I'm back. I am still figuring out how to do this live thing. And last time when I fumbled my way through my first live, I did one on my phone. I joined from Instagram and Facebook, and one on my phone and one on my computer, but this time it wasn't working on my laptop, so I will figure that out. So I'm just on Instagram now, and look forward to chatting with you there. I will keep learning and growing with this live thing, with this technology. But let's dive in to the reason that I'm here today. I'm looking forward to talking with you about this idea of telling kids to make good choices versus cultivating wise choices. And I am Dr. Heather Klein. I'm a parent educator, a teacher educator, and I'm also a mom to a 7.5-year-old, almost 8-year-old son named CJ. And, over the past several years, I got into working with parents, supporting parent educators long before I became a parent. And there are pros and cons to that. And I've talked with students about that a lot. I'm glad I've had both experiences. But now, over the last several years, my professional roles and personal roles have really been colliding. And they have made me incredibly fascinated by, even more so, how we can support our children as developing human beings while we are ourselves mere humans. And I don't know about you, but I'm still working on all of the same stuff as my son. So as we get into this conversation today, I want to be really clear that I assume we're all human beings and that no one is a robot who can, be programmed to perfection. So I'm not a robot. You're not a robot. That's my assumption about you. And that neither of us are raising robots, right? So, if you are, then this might not be a conversation for you. And I am not a software engineer. I nearly failed my computer science class that I took in college. My relationship and psychology and education classes went far better than computer science. I am fascinated by the beautiful messiness of navigating relationships that we care so deeply about, and yet they bring a lot of conflict and tension into our everyday interactions. And really, that comes back to us all being unique individuals with different needs and expectations and feelings, which contradict each other and create conflict. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. And I have begun to see conflict with our kids as one of the most powerful opportunities to connect with them, to build that relationship with this person we care so much about, to support their development. And at the same time, I want to help myself and help you and help other parents as much as possible, because doing that within this context of conflict is really freaking hard. It's really hard to try to connect with our kid when we're feeling frustrated. It's really hard to respond in a way that supports their development when we're really stressed out or overwhelmed or annoyed or embarrassed or whatever it is, when we're being human. And so, we can often feel that way when we see our kids behave in ways that to us feel like a not so good choice or a bad choice. So I invite you to think about, what those choices are for your kids, what you see them doing that you wish they did differently. What are those choices that you see as not so good or bad? And of course, part of the reason we can be here in this conversation is because our kids are capable of making good choices. We know that they are. We've seen them do it. I'm sure you can think about good choices that your kids have made recently, or go back as far as you need to. But I'm sure you can find that we have great kids, and so something to think about. The good choices that your kids are making, you see them as good choices because they speak to your desire as parents. They speak to, likely they look like kindness or respect or being responsible or something to that effect within those characteristics or dispositions. And you might think of some others as well. So when we think about that, now I invite you to do a quick check-in with yourself as a fellow human along with your kid, and think about what percentage of time do you behave or react in ways that you would deem kind, respectful, responsible, and this is with others. This is also with yourself. So how often, what percentage of the time are you making good choices that you would characterize as kind and respectful and responsible, or whatever the disposition is for you? And what percentage of the time are you maybe making choices that would be considered a not so good choice, unkind or irresponsible or disrespectful? And that again is to other people and yourself. And I'm not here to tell you what that should look like. That's not what we're going to chat about. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a sense of what we're talking about when we talk about helping our kids make good choices or wise choices, as we'll continue to talk about. So now I want to talk about how we typically teach our children to make those good choices, because I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, and I'm thinking about how we help people learn and grow. That's what I'm really fascinated in. And so this conversation is about how we help children learn and grow, how we help ourselves learn and grow. Often it kind of reminds me of like at the airport when it says, if you see something, say something. So we see our kids make a not so good choice and we point it out to them in the moment. I might say, CJ, you threw your towel on the floor again. Go pick it up. How many times do I have to tell you to pick up your towel? CJ, let go of your friend. He has to go home now. And we might even take it further and ask them why they did what they did and why were they thinking, what were you thinking? And often we go into a long explanation of what we want them to do instead of what they did. So we tell them what this other choice looks like. So take a minute to just think about if you relate to that or not, or what it looks like in your family with your child. So then, we've done that. And so then we can warn them to make a good choice. Then we can kind of prompt them, make good choices when you're over at your friend's house, make good choices at school, we remind them to make a good choice, which means that's like the shortcut of, remember what I told you to do what I told you to do. So, and often we are saying this, again and again, and it can feel like a broken record. So here are some things that are happening. I want to talk about some things that are happening that make this such a broken record conversation, that make this frustrating, that make this like yet another tension in your day, 100 times a day or a week or whatever it is. Because I want to ease that. I want to create a different dynamic for you and your child, and I want to support your connection and support your child's development as well. So, first of all, even though our request or expectation of them and their good choice is very reasonable to us or logical or obvious, our request is coming from our perspective, not theirs. So that's the first thing, and I'm going to dig more into that in a moment. Second is that when we tell them in such a direct way, we're actually not engaging their perspective, which means it's really hard for them to integrate our expectation into their reaction system. So into those default thoughts and instincts that are going to prompt their choice that they make in the moment next time in that future situation. So if you work with me in any capacity as a parent or parent educator, coach, you know that I believe that perception is primary. In other words, our perspective guides our interpretation and reaction. But we often focus so much, we kind of jump ahead, we skip over to the reaction and focus on the behavior and intervening there. But that means we're skipping over the part that's inside of us. That's the part that's inside of our kids' brains and our bodies that prompt how they interpret the situation and decide how to react. Okay, so let's dig into the first piece. So even though our request or expectation seems very reasonable, hello, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for being here. So I'm just gonna keep on going here. So even though we have a request or an expectation about what choice would be a good choice for them to make, it seems very reasonable, it seems very logical or obvious to us, that request is coming from our perspective. It's not coming from theirs. So we're seeing the situation in a completely different way than they are. We have a different set of needs, desires, expectations, habits, and feelings. And all of those things inform how we see the situation and how we would expect them to respond or anyone to respond. It's almost like a different language. Like, we're seeing an A, but they're seeing, like a triangles or a pyramid. We're not on the same page. Maybe they're on, if you're a book reader, we're on page 300 and they're on page 3. And so we're looking at completely different things, even though we might be standing in the same place. The second piece to remember is that we want to teach our kids to, so we're teaching, when we're telling them what the good choice would be, we're teaching our kids to respond as we would respond, to act as we would want them to act. And again, your situation is unique, so I can't speak to what might be an appropriate request or not, but actually the process that I'll talk about in a moment helps you determine what would be appropriate for you and for them, because it's really unique for your family, for every family. So I can't give you that answer. Really, no one can, but I can give you a process to help you determine what that answer is. But what we usually do is use our words to tell our kids what to do or stop doing, to tell them to make good choices, which is a shortcut to, remember what I told you to do or stop doing. And there are a couple of layers to this as well. The really simple piece of this is that we're only engaging a really small piece of their brain, and mostly it's like short-term memory that gets forgotten. Because think about it, when you're speaking, you have a lot of meaning behind what you're saying, what you want them to do. There's a reason for what you're saying. There are feelings behind what you're saying. There are memories and experiences informing what you're saying and what you perceive as a good choice. So as a parent, our expectation and perspective is fully integrated in us. But when we just tell our kids what we want them to know and do, they don't have a chance to make sense of it in a meaningful way that helps them make an intentional choice in the future. They are creating stories around these repeated interactions. And I think the best way that we can relate to this is to think about our own experience. So if you jump into your life as a human being, not just thinking about helping your child develop, do you have a boss, or have you ever had a boss? Perhaps you remember being in school, or you're a part of an organization or a community where there are rules and expectations put on you by someone else. Perhaps even your family of origin that continues to hold expectations for you. So all of our, we're all in relationships with other humans who have ideas about what would be a good choice for us to make. Let me know if you relate to this. Just say yes, or give me a thumbs up if you are in relationships where other people have expectations for what would be a good choice for you. Thank you, yes. I think we're all there, and that's what, we can see all over social media, that as adults, we're starting to recognize that a lot of these good choices are those obligations, those shoulds that we're working really hard to break free from, so that we can find that very quiet voice inside of us that's our own. The one that we've maybe lost track of because of the noise of all the good choices we're supposed to make has been so loud for so long. So let me know. I'm glad to see, Miriam, that you can relate to this. That's awesome. And, we're all in it. We're all processing that. So I want to create a different situation for you and your child, so that these things these good choices you're helping your child learn how to make, that they are integrating them in a different way that doesn't end up being, a thing that they're processing as an adult to make their own. I'm just going to quickly run through the points so far, and we're going to keep moving forward about how to shift this. So again, when we tell our kids what a good choice would be, that's based on our expectation, which is our perspective. So it's coming from our perspective, not from theirs. And to add to that, when we tell them with our words from our perspective, we're often not doing it in a way that engages them so that they can make meaning of it, so that they can make it their own, so that it can guide them in a future decision. Except that they might eventually comply out of obligation or fear or some motivation that's outside of themselves that doesn't end up contributing to the connection we want with them, the relationship that we want with them. So that's where we begin to talk about wisdom and cultivating wise choices as an alternative to telling them to make a good choice. And we will talk about that in the context of being a human being as a parent, and that is hard to do, and that we can get help to do that. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to be robots that know exactly how to do that. And I'm going to get to that. Okay. So my work for nearly 20 years has been based on this notion that wisdom can't be told. That original statement was published in the Harvard Business Review by this professor named Charles Gregg. And this is just his perspective. This type of thing has been said, since people were speaking and writing things down. There are quotes from Galileo of, we cannot teach people anything, we can only help them discover it for themselves or within themselves. Socrates saying, I cannot teach anybody anything, I can only make them think. So this is not a new idea. I'm really fascinated with how we can bring that into our parenting world and supporting children's development to help them think and discover for themselves what would be a good choice. So a big piece of this is helping children to make the expectation their own, in their own way, make a meaning of it. And so how can we as parents create this learning environment that engages them in that way to do that? And so that it could become a part of their decision-making process instead of something they do because they were supposed to do it. And I think, what's great about this is it recognizes that we all have agency. We're all sort of agentic beings, meaning we all want freedom over our choices. So we can work with that. We can leverage that as parents, so that we're developing and our children are developing and we're connecting in our relationship. But we also, of course, we desire connection. We desire belonging. So sometimes that actually can be a motivator to comply, which then we find ourselves processing as adults through all of those shoulds that we complied with, and then we lost our connection to ourselves. Okay, so how in the world do we do this as parents when we have, we're in a stressful moment with our kids, we're maybe feeling frustrated about the choice they made, and we are still learning how to navigate that ourselves, regulate ourselves. We're all learning that. None of us, unless you've done a lot of mindfulness, meditation work. I've done a fair amount and I'm still very much working on it. So I think we can use all the help we can get with this. Because I find that supporting our children's development to make wise decisions, to make good choices in the moment, requires a lot of self-regulation that I don't always have when I'm frustrated as a parent. So let's think about, the core of what is needed for our children to go beyond just forgetting, sort of having the message go in one ear and out the other, because it was at the top of their mind and they forgot about it. It wasn't engaged with their perspective. We need to engage their perspective. They actually need to have some awareness of their own perspective. They probably haven't even thought about it. And we maybe haven't thought about what actually was their perspective. What did drive them? What were they trying to do? And why did they want to do that? And how were they feeling? So we need to create this opportunity for them, for both of us to understand both of our perspectives and maybe other people's perspectives as well. So there are elements of self-awareness, perspective taking, empathy, understanding our goals and our needs and our feelings, and several other aspects. This is a lot of social emotional development that's happening in these moments of conflict, or these moments where we see our children perhaps making choices that we wish were different. So again, if you go back to that book analogy, if they're on page 3 and we're on page 300, neither of those pages are really working for us because the other person is in a completely different place. So what page does work for us right now? And that might change as our child grows or in different moments, but we need to find sort of that sweet spot that feels satisfying to both of us. And that's where, and so that's complicated for us to talk about, but there is a way to do it. And that's how I've found the hourglass problem solving chart to be such a lifesaver, to like help me do these things, help me support my child's development, help support self-awareness and perspective taking when I am having a hard time doing that myself. So I'll show you what this looks like. Hello, welcome. So we're just getting into showing off this is the problem solving chart that helps cultivate wise choices, and without us having to be perfect or having to be a robot or having to be fully self-regulated or having to be a child development expert. Even if we are, we can feel frustrated as adults. Okay, so let me break down what's happening. So this simple piece of paper, it's just a piece of paper, but it's way more than that when you get into it, because it's a set of questions. It is intentionally designed from the framework of an hourglass, and that's because it starts off and allows you to start off on page 300 and allows your child to start off on page 3, so you can start where you are. Start from each of your different perspectives, and then just like an hourglass, so that's broad at the top of the hourglass, and then you start focusing in, getting more specific about what each of you did, what each of you were feeling, what each of you were wanting or are wanting. So it guides you to notice and think about what you did and why you did it and how you felt. What the other person did and why they did it and how they felt. And those are things that often get jumped over when we don't have something to write on, when we're just in the moment, because both of the perspectives matter. So sometimes we might focus on one perspective over the other, but having something to write on that gives space for both of you allows both of your perspectives to come out, and then you can honor those. You can hold space for those. It's right there written down. And so when you go through that process together, it actually engages your mind and your body. So it goes deeper than just that top of mind, telling your child what to do differently. It's going to help you both slow down and connect with aspects of the situation that are bigger picture, that connect with memories and feelings, and also the visual. So I'll do a whole nother session in the future about the power of the visual. But this visual aspect of simply writing down these pieces of conversation is so powerful. It helps you remember the lesson. It helps kids remember the good choice and the reason for making the good choice. So it gets into that decision-making process that helps them make the future choice, which is something that we talked about before. It also leads you to shared language that brings you both back to this conversation. So when you use language like make a good choice, you know what that means, but your kid might not have a lot of connection to, like that might just be kind of a random statement. But when you've gone through a process like hourglass problem solving, you have the shared language that you come up with together that is connected with your feelings, the visual of writing, the needs. You're sharing your needs and desires and goals with each other. So all of that is wrapped up in the memory, in that language that you use. And just to give you an example, I did this with my son a year or so ago, and we did this after he had sort of had a hard time with wrapping up time with friends, and we came up with shared language around, remember that's not going to get you what you want. When he makes that choice, remember that's not going to get you what you want. And that's not a statement that I'm telling you to just like plop into your conversation with your kid. That statement had meaning for us because we had this conversation together. And so when I said that, there's my son right now. Hey CJ, remember how I'm still on a conversation? So
I have something super cool to show you.
You super cool? Okay, I'm going to see it in a little bit. I can't wait. Okay.
How long is it going to take?
It's going to take about 10 more minutes. Okay?
Okay.
Can you shut the door, please? Okay, where was I? So you can create that shared language that you and them know and have meaning to. So now there's like an anchoring of what you're saying, an anchoring into meaning. Thank you. Okay, so let's see, where were we? Now I have to bring myself back to this moment. So you have the visual, you bring it into the hourglass with the specific, you bring feelings into it, you bring needs into it, you're understanding each other, and now you're working together on this shared problem solving chart. You're not working against each other anymore about you knowing the right answer and them not having the right answer, not making the good choice. You're working together now, and you're able then as an hourglass, if you can visualize an hourglass, it starts going back out again, broadening back out again at the bottom. So that prompts you to step back and look at where what happened and why it happened. Look at outcomes and implications. It ends up helping your child step back and look at, well, how did my action impact my parent? How did my action impact, how did it actually support my goal? Did it maybe support my goal, or did it maybe not, because it's leading to these future consequences that I hadn't thought about, which is an advanced skill that we're helping our child to develop the capacity of, to think about not just my needs in the moment, but how does it actually impact the future situations, future playtimes or future whatever it is. And it also prompts you to think about, what kind of relationship do we want? Like, what might happen if we keep interacting in this way? If I keep having to tell you to do that or stop doing that, what is that is that the kind of relationship we want? So it prompts you to think about that. And at that point, as you've gone through that process, you're going to find that you naturally come to a new insight, a new way, like a new page in the book. Wow, you found that spot, that sweet spot that feels good to you, feels good to them. And if you care about it, it actually leads you to find a developmentally appropriate expectation that is specific to your child and to you and to the situation, because nobody else knows exactly that. You can base an expectation on your child's age, but that's only going to get you so far. And often, it just doesn't meet your child specifically where they are with that circumstance, with that challenge, with that tension that keeps coming up again. So when you work together with this process, you come to a point where you're understanding each other, and you don't have to let go of, completely throw away your expectations or your needs. You get to be a human. You get to have your own feelings and needs, and your child gets to have them as well, and you find a middle ground, and then you can have a plan moving forward. And the back of the hourglass chart, it has the instructions at the top, but then it also has this space to put your solution. And so you can fold that and put it right on the fridge or somewhere in your house, so you have your solution, your plan that that you can remember, that gives you that visual. Visuals are very helpful in so many ways, and I'll talk about that in a future situation, or a future live session. But I'm going to pause there. I've been talking at you quite a bit. I'm going to pause to see if you have any questions about anything I've mentioned. And I would also either a question or let me know, are you someone who has said, has told your kids to make a good choice, or what is resonating for you in what I've talked about so far? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And maybe you just want to say, yes, this is hard to do as a parent. Oh, good. I'm glad this is helpful, Marian. Wonderful. Yeah, and just simply, even if you grab a piece of paper in your house and have that in front of you and use that to kind of take notes during a conversation, that can give you a place to start. If you want the full thing mapped out for you, so that it's guided, you can find that on my website. Just print out the piece of paper and use that, and that'll walk you through the questions to ask. So you say, definitely I find myself trying to find those ways to let him express and have his own voice without me influencing based on my experience. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and I find that it's hard. It's a lot of work for your brain to hold another person's perspective and your own at the same time. Oh, good. I'm glad I'm explaining this in a way that helps you see it. And it's not just like, it doesn't mean something's wrong with you if you find it hard to give space for your child's perspective and then keep track of your own perspective, and then try in your head while all of this is swirling around to figure out how to come together. That's a lot for your brain to navigate when it's hard for our brain to remember more than 7 digits. at a time. So that means it's also hard for us to keep track of multiple needs and expectations and feelings and then find some way for all of it to work together. You're about to use it this morning with your teenager. Yay. The hardest part for you is finding the time. Yeah, enough time after they cool off and can think with me. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that is a challenge. And it sounds like you will find it. And it depends on the kid. You know, sometimes you can do it when you're still frustrated, and sometimes you need to cool off. But I'm excited to hear. I hope that you'll reach out and share how it goes. And one thing to think about, of course, this is always the case with things that are ultimately helpful for us. And I run into this all the time. It applies to every area of our life, but, you know, finding that time for this conversation actually ends up like saving so much time on the other end. It saves our future self time, which, you know, we're not used to sort of thinking about saving our future self time. We're thinking about our current self. But it saves our future self that time and frustration if we can come to this place of connection and understanding and a new plan, then we can move forward with less frustration and more peace and more ease, and we're working together. But yeah, I'm with you that the things that are helpful for us often take time that we haven't planned for. Like exercise. I haven't done that yet today. Awesome. Thank you both for your contributions. Any questions? Oh, wow. Thank you, Marian. You're amazing too. I'm glad you're here. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to join me. And if you haven't, okay, Marian, I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. Yes, take care. If you haven't already grabbed the Hourglass Problem Solving Chart, since you're here live, you can get that half off. I think it's live 50. If you go to my website, you can get that half off for just use live 50 code at checkout. So thanks for being here. I can't wait to hear from you and hear how it goes with cultivating wisdom in your children and yourself and connecting through conflict. It sounds like I need to go and connect with my kiddo and find out what really cool thing he created. All right, you caught the last of this live, but you had a chance to see the chart and think about how to use it. Awesome. Okay, bye-bye. Have a wonderful day. Now I have to figure out how to, oh, here we go. Still figuring out how to do all this. Okay, bye-bye.